What's up, guys? Swift here. It's NFL draft season, my favorite time of the year. I think you guys know that. I love talking NFL draft with anybody. I got my guy J2K over here. If you are familiar with me and you watch a lot of my videos, you've definitely seen J2K in the comments. I've also seen him make appearances over on good shows I watch, BCP and the Nomad Network. Finally got him over here. J2K, say what's up to the people.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on, Swift. I really appreciate. This is like a favorite time of the year for me as well. I love talking prospects and what the Bears are gonna do. Yeah, and hi to everybody in the chat. I know you guys see me. I see you too, and I appreciate saying hi to you guys every time we get a chance to talk on Swift's channel and all the other great channels out there.
Yeah, man, it's an honor to have you. And honestly, I respect your draft knowledge, and guys like you and Adam Mason that have been in my comments for 2 years, actually putting me onto draft prospects and you know giving me knowledge as well in the comments and letting me know there's other guys like me out there that live and breathe the draft year long. And you guys are probably into it now more than I am because I make Bears videos every day and sometimes don't have as much time. So I'm looking forward to this. What we're going to talk about today is we're probably going to hit up the Bears' positions of need and some of our favorite prospects at those positions. And I'll probably hit J2K with some questions on those guys, especially if he knows them better than me, to get us a little bit more familiar with those prospects. Let's go ahead and start out. Wide receiver is the one. I mean, we might as well go ahead and get into wide receiver. Do you want to go ahead and however you want to lead it off, if you want to do some rankings or give me some of your favorite guys to start, and then I'll ask you some questions more in depth about certain guys.
I think starting off, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, those are the two top guys on my board. And I do think there's a slight drop off for the next group of guys. So these two, I think they are pure, true number one wide receivers in any offense on any team. Once we get past these guys, I think there's some really good role players or additional guys. Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas are two guys that I really like that wouldn't be necessarily a true number one in my book. But when you pair them up with another talented receiver, I think you can have an explosive offense.
I think those guys both pair perfectly with DJ Moore that you just mentioned there as well. Great
Yes,
call.
yes, absolutely. And I do have Marvin Harrison just a little bit above Neighbors. It is very close to me, and I like them both for slightly different reasons. One of the things about Marvin Harrison Jr. is he didn't have a very good quarterback last year. And so I don't think we ever saw truly how good he could have been had CJ Stroud stayed another year. So I have him a little bit higher than Neighbors. I love what Neighbors does. And going into the draft, or if you're doing mock drafts, I'd be happy with either one of those guys at a trade back at 2 or 3.
Perfect. Yeah. And then wide receivers, after those first, I have them grouped with Rome Odunze in the top 3 as well, but I wouldn't argue with your rankings at all. But my next grouping of guys, that's who I kind of want to talk about there as well. There's guys that I think could also fill that role, that Marvin Harrison role. Like you said, big wide receiver could come in and be our number 2. And some of the guys that I think fans and myself are really interested in, I'm going to list Adonai Mitchell from Texas. I'm going to list Keon Coleman from Florida State, and a guy you just mentioned already, Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU. He's a bit overlooked sometimes because of Malik Neighbors, but he's another first-round prospect. I think all 3 of those guys go in the first round, but there's a chance one of them slips into early round 2 as well. What are your thoughts on those guys?
So I do like them as a group. I think you're talking X wide receiver, big physical guys. My concern, Daniel Mitchell, I do have some concerns with him. It has a lot to do with consistency. He's a big body receiver, great length. I sometimes see him body catch the ball. Generally, he is a pretty good hands catching receiver, but sometimes he doesn't really get position on DBs that I like to see. Sometimes I've seen him ask for the ball, get a little frustrated on the field, and then they'll target him. And sometimes he doesn't really play up to his size and his capabilities. So for me, Mitchell is a really huge boom or bust prospect. And if we could get him in the mid second round, I wouldn't mind that pick at all. My preference would be Brian Thomas. Um, I just think he's a smooth wide receiver. He's got good speed. He's got good size. He's a hand catcher receiver, playing next to neighbors in that offense with more of a running quarterback in another offense, another team. If he was on Washington, I think he would be a star. I think we'd be talking about him a lot more. So he's a little bit of a diamond in the rough for me. And then Keon Coleman, I really liked him coming out in the beginning of the season, but their quarterback got hurt, so we didn't see as much of him. I have seen him do a good job dropping in and out of his breaks, dropping his hips. But he's a really big guy, and he's a true 6'4" guy, where some of these other guys might be 6'3", maybe even 6'2". So I do like him as a great hands catcher. I just, my concern is just we didn't see enough of him through this season for me to just stamp him into the first round. But then again, these guys are talented, and there's offensive coordinators, wide receiver coaches who, they've got big egos, and they see that, hey, I can work with this guy.
I had Keon Coleman ranked higher coming into the season. I
Yes.
initially, when the season started, I had him in my top 3. It was Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Keon Coleman. I thought Keon Coleman was going to be that guy with Jordan Travis getting hurt. You also had Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell, and Trey Benson getting the ball more. The offense was a little bit more spread out. What
Yeah.
I saw from, I think you said a similar thing, is he didn't create the separation I was looking for this year. But what I did like from him, I saw a lot of explosiveness. And to me, he's the best hands catcher in the draft. Like his catch radius and ability to come down with those, not only just contested catches, but sometimes the spectacular catch, going up and getting you
Yeah.
with one hand.
On that point, when you talk about a guy who's got the height, they've got the arm length, and they're a hands catcher, it makes a quarterback's job so much easier. And maybe he doesn't create the most separation on his routes, but you still got this just enormous wingspan to throw to. And that's what I really love about Coleman's game.
And he's a guy who, I mean, you said it, quarterback's best friend. And it's a guy I've always wanted for Justin Fields, a guy where you can just kind of sometimes when you're in trouble, throw the ball up and he's got, you could throw up a 50-50 ball, but he's a guy who makes a 50-50 ball a 90-10 ball. And when you have
Yes.
a guy like that, it can make the offense easier because when there's nothing there, he can make a big play out of nothing, continue moving the chains, and allow us to get the ball back to DJ Moore or Cole Kmet or get the offense going. But I want a big receiver like that. Personally, Marvin Harrison Jr., Romo Dunze, or any of these 3, I would be happy with, depending on where we got them. And those other 3, again, Adonai Mitchell from Texas, Keon Coleman from Florida State, and Brian Thomas from LSU. I have all of those guys as guys I think would fit that role for me of being that big bodied physical possession target that complements DJ Moore and really helps us continue building this offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think we might be able to put Xavier Legette into that X category. I know he showed up at 6'1" at the Senior Bowl, but when I watch tape of him, he goes up and he gets the ball. He is a hands catcher. He bodies guys out in great leaping ability. So he's someone who also offers some punt return skills. He is
Keon
very
Coleman too,
raw.
yeah, that's another thing with Keon Coleman as well.
Yes, which is actually pretty incredible for a guy who's 6'4". You don't see that with punt returners, and that's another reason to really like Keon Coleman is that special team side to him. Yeah, with Leggett, I think there is
He
a ton
plays
of
bigger than
upside.
his size
Yeah,
size for sure,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And he also, you got to understand that he came in I believe as a quarterback into college, and then they switched him to wide receiver. So the reason why he's a 1-year wonder, or he just broke out this year, it just took time for this guy to switch to the new position.
100%. And then going deeper at wide receiver here, I think we all want that big X wide receiver, and that's hopefully something Ryan Poles will get done early in the draft. But this draft at wide receiver is so deep. I talked about a lot of guys when I was down at the Senior Bowl, but is there anybody late in this draft or any day 2, day 3 targets that you'd also like to see come to Chicago?
Well, we're talking X receiver, so I'm going to stick on that train. Brendan Rice, he has got good size. He's got good length, good speed. He's a pretty good hands catching receiver. My issue with him is sometimes he does get out physicaled when he is um, bodied up by a DB. So that's something to keep an eye on. But he's got the size, he's got the length to possibly be a good X receiver. When we get to some other Y receiver, Z receiver, I've got some other guys who I think really fit.
If you
Johnny
want to go with
Wilson, I
those
know.
guys. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, Johnny Wilson. He's 6'7". I don't know what to do with him. He doesn't get enough separation, and you're kind of looking at moving him to tight end. Maybe you run him as a big slot receiver, so he just out towers linebackers, and he can outrun a linebacker.
I
But
could
I
see
do
a
think
team
he's going to
wanting
struggle
to
with separation.
Yeah, I could see a team wanting to do that. That's what they did at the Senior Bowl. He struggled day 1. Day 2, they put him on the linebackers and safeties in the 1v1s. And the thing with him, his stride is so long that on
Yeah,
like those quick slants over the middle, you can't guard him. If you can get the because you can throw the ball in this huge catch radius area that he dominated on slants for a certain portion of the week. Like there was a one session where like he would just run in slants on safeties and linebackers and they could not stop him. But he wasn't
right.
having the same success against wide receivers. So just like you said, it's like we don't know what to do with them or where he fits in exactly, but some GM's going to fall in love with that skill set.
Yeah, and just going back to that catch radius, you just how is a 5'11" DB safety gonna go up to a guy who's 6'7", who's a hands catcher and knock that ball away,
That's a tantalizing prospect where you see a lot of things. It's kind of like Chase Claypool in that regard, where and he's bigger. He's bigger with longer arms and possibly just as fast. And you're like, this guy could be an absolute freak out here. But then
Right.
you don't see the suddenness or the speed or the separation you want to see yet. So his draft stock is probably down, which would make him a more likely target for the Bears. If we could get him in round 3 or later, even somewhere, say if he falls to round 4 or 5 or something, hey, that's a guy I'm really interested in at that range.
Yeah, he's a ball of clay, so to speak.
And then did you want to touch on the slot receivers or the wide receivers?
Yeah, I did. So I think Lad McConkey, man, he is so quick in and out of his breaks. He understands how to create separation at the top of his routes. So he's very intriguing. My only question with him is, man, he is very small. So obviously, he reminds you of the New England Patriots wide receivers of the past, running those option routes, those whip routes. So I really like his game. My question really is how much Poles is going to want a smaller wide receiver. Um, Velus Jones, he's 6'1" and he's 220, so he's got good size. We tend to like guys who can also block. I think Taylor Scott to me was a little bit out of the norm of what I've seen from Poles and what he's signing at wide receivers. So that starts to get me thinking, okay, what about, a guy like Roman Wilson, who actually balled out at the Senior Bowl, a guy I really liked even
Yeah.
before the Senior Bowl. But this guy is just creating all sorts of separation. I look at guys like Xavier Worthy from Texas, who absolutely, I mean, he's a thin guy, 170 something, around 6 foot. He just creates so much separation that it's hard to ignore. And also, he can be a punt returner, kick returner. I'm looking at guys like Ricky Pearsall, who've got a little bit better height. I think he's 6'1", 190. He is a fantastic hands catcher. I'm really high on Ricky Pearsall. Goes up, gets the ball. I think there's a little bit of a lack of physicality on the line when he has a DB. In the NFL, they're going to have DBs who are going to be press coverage, which you don't get in college. So I do have question marks on that. But also something I saw from his game is he's a fantastic blocker. So he's got me kind of hyped up as a definite target for
And
polls
he
and
could
company.
fall further than Lad. I think Lad McConkey is a guy who's probably gonna go high second round.
Yeah,
I think Pearsall, you can probably get in round 3, and he's a
yeah,
guy. I think you're right, he does fit a lot of what we look for. He's a hustle player. He's versatile. He could probably line up anywhere, but he best fits in the slot, and he's a guy who is his creative route running in the slot. He has this body control. He jukes people out and has awesome footwork. There was 3 of those guys, him, McConkey, and Luke McCaffrey. All of those guys, I think, are perfect slot weapons in the NFL.
yeah. And I love Luke McCaffrey's game. I kind of started watching the stuff and I just couldn't stop.
So
And then to preface this is, he started off as quarterback in college, then he moved to running back, which is bizarre because he's really skinny,
mhm.
but he does have a lot of physicality to his game. And then in the last 2 years he spent as a wide receiver, and he looks just like a natural. He runs great routes. He's breaking guys off with his routes. He understands zone. He understands how to beat man. He's got long arms, good size, very physical, pure hands catcher. And there's a bunch of just like absolute special plays that he has made. I think last season he had 3 plays in the end zone where the DB literally ripped the guy his helmet off, and Luke McCaffrey still went up, bodied out the DB, and caught the ball.
Man,
And I think he even had a one-handed catch in the Senior
Senior
Bowl
Bowl, yeah,
game.
best catch of the
Yeah,
game, man. Yeah,
I
reached
mean,
out, extended, fully extended. Yep.
yeah, so much upside to him. And you just talk about bloodlines. You talk about an easy transition in the NFL. I am very, very high on him.
I think that was one of my biggest things of the week is heading into it. I thought Lad McConkey and Ricky Pearsall would be clearly ahead of Luke McCaffrey. And I thought McConkey would actually separate himself above the 3, but there were actually a lot closer than I thought. I thought any one of them could come in and be a slot weapon instantly day 1 in the NFL. McConkey's probably the most polished and ready to
Right,
do it day 1, but I wouldn't argue if you can get McCaffrey 3 rounds later. I would probably
right.
rather do that because I think he can be just as effective. I was not expecting that heading into there. He was one of the guys who surprised me the most. And then I'll say one more guy because my favorite guy when I was down there at the combine or at the Senior Bowl was Malachi Corley from
Yes.
West Kentucky. What are your thoughts on him?
I love Corley. Just the physicality he plays with. He's 5'11", 2 something, maybe 205,
Yeah,
but he's
210 maybe.
incredibly physical. His explosiveness is off the chart. He's a pure hands catcher. The only catch with him is that I saw a stat that said he had run was the shortest amount of yards getting the pass to him. So I
Mhm.
mean, he's a yak machine, but they ran him on all sorts of like bubble screens, short area crossers. They're just like giving him the ball and just said, run, Corley, run.
Yeah, and that's
But
what he
I,
came down to the Senior Bowl to kind of prove, hey, that's what he said it to everybody. I think here to prove I'm more than a running back. I can do more than catch screens, and he was showing it. His route tree was extensive at the Senior Bowl, so I loved it.
that's awesome. That's really good to hear because yeah, I didn't actually hear too much on Corley in the Senior Bowl. So I love hearing that his route tree is expanding. Yeah, he to me he's another ball of clay that you want to get into the building. I know he can return kicks and punts, so he's going to be on the roster every game. And you just figure out a way, get this ball in this guy's hand. The next couple of years, you get his route running, his route tree expanded, and he could be an absolute gamer for us.
I love it, man. This wide receiver class is so deep. There's guys we didn't even talk about that I'd love to talk about, like Javon Baker.
No, can you actually tell me about Javon Baker? I haven't studied him, and I know you really like him, and everything I've heard is really good.
He's a touchdown machine. His ball tracking skills, they reminded me last year when I watched the Senior Bowl last year, was Jaden Reed was that guy where
Mm-hmm.
he was just really explosive, really quick, but when the ball was in the air, he almost always managed to come down with it. He could contort his body and he would make those plays. That's Javon Baker this year. Really electric, and whenever the ball was in the air, even if the quarterback threw a bad pass, there's a great chance he's coming down with it. And I think he's a guy that's really exciting late round.
Nice. I'm gonna watch some tape right after we talk, man.
Heck yeah. Okay, we'll move on to centers then. I think
Yeah.
when I went down the Senior Bowl, it was kind of the goal was who's the best center in this draft, and I had three guys in mind: JPJ, Zach Frazier from West Virginia, and Cedric Van Pran from Georgia. Von Pran didn't show up. He was last minute scratch. I don't know the details there. And then Zach Frazier was injured, not cleared for contact, but did some positional work. And meanwhile, JPJ stood out. He dominated everybody down there, looked like a surefire first round pick. So that kind of separated himself at the position for me. What are your thoughts on the center position this year?
Oh, I think you nailed it. JPJ, I think he's a star in the making. I think he could go as high as 20 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who need a center.
I think even
Um,
one pick before the Bengals at 19 right there.
oh yeah, yeah. And I know in mock drafts he's not nearly as high, but come draft day, this guy is absolutely going to go that high. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, why draft a center in the first round? It's not as important." I mean, you just got to put it on the tape. And this guy is so good. He's so powerful, so strong, but he's incredibly quick and he's nasty. And for him to come in the Senior Bowl, I think at 330 and to
335,
still
I think. Yeah,
335,
dominated.
I mean, and still have this explosiveness and this athleticism. I mean, that's out of this world as far as centers are concerned. You just don't see this combination of size, athleticism, and then just pure nastiness. I mean, yeah, man, I would absolutely trade back from 9 to 20 and draft this kid and be happy.
Yeah, I love
Um,
that's one of my favorite ideas to do this year with that number 9 pick. It's like, hey, let's trade down, go somewhere between 17 and 20, take JPJ. I mean, that's a dream for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Day one starter. And I mean, hey, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you're a day one starter as a center and you play 10, 15 years in this league, you might be getting a gold jacket. So Zach Frazier, I really like Zach Frazier. I think there's a lot to do with it has a lot to do with him, his wrestling background where he gets leverage and he really can get advantage on guys who are bigger than him. He can out physical guys. He can out technique guys. I really like him. My only concern, though, is the athleticism, how much we're going to ask him to move in the wide zone, in the duo, getting up onto linebackers. How well is he going to do against an athletic linebacker trying to slip his block? I know he's great at technique. Sometimes guys who are so good at technique, and this kind of reminds me of Peter Skoronsky from last year's draft. They almost tap out on technique, but there isn't as much physical side to them to really push that ceiling much higher. I think you're going to get a day one starter from him. You're going to get a very good center. I question how is he a Pro Bowl center? Is he going to be one of the elite centers? But I think he's a very safe pick, and I do think he does. He fits enough, I think, with what we do. So I wouldn't be down on him.
Yeah, you're right on there with me with Zach Frazier. I think he's really smart, really powerful, and going to be a really good player. I think the athleticism is the question, especially when we're talking about Ryan Poles and what he likes in his athletic profiles from players he drafts. But Zach Frazier is a guy who could fall a little bit, especially due to the injury. I'd love to have add him as a day 2 pick if we miss out on JPJ.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Cedric Van Pran, I got to admit to this. I don't think I'm there yet on an opinion with him. I had a higher expectations from the hype when
Okay.
I went into started watching film on him. And there's nothing I really want to complain about, but there's not a lot that I'm overly excited about at the same time. For me, it's a little bit hard to put into words because I think you do see some length, you do see some athleticism, you do see good size there. I think he's a relatively safe pick, but there
It's
are question marks.
Yeah,
Yeah, go
he's a
ahead, Phil.
tough no, he's a tough one. That's why I wanted to ask your opinion on him precisely because he's tough for me. I can't really put a finger on it yet, but I feel like there's something missing in his game, and I
Right.
really wanted to see him at the Senior Bowl. So when he didn't show up and JPJ dominated, they just kind of separated themselves. And I see he was a guy who heading into the process, he was supposed to come out last year. He stuck around another year, was supposed to be the top center in this year's class. And I haven't seen it yet. So
Right.
I just have some question marks with him, and I don't know exactly where I'm going to end up placing him on my board. But he's definitely looks like he could be a round 3 guy in my opinion right now.
Right. Yeah, and I think a big part of it for me is when you watch JPJ and you watch Zach Frazier and you watch them just do these moves on these guys where it's a duo block and he's just kicking the defensive tackle over to the guard side with ease and perfect technique, and then they shift up to the linebacker and
Get
they
to
just
that second
absolutely just
level, yep.
destroy the
Boom.
linebacker. So you're seeing all this explosion, and then you go to Cedric Van Pran and you're like, he got there. He made his block. He's doing all right. He's doing pretty good. I don't know if it's just the grass looks greener on the other side with these other two, and then missing out on the Senior Bowl. Man, that's what I was hoping for. I wanted to see him compete in those one-on-one drills because that's really what shows up. And the Senior Bowl is so great with D line versus O line because you really get to see, how good people's techniques are. What are their counter moves? What are their counter moves off of counter moves? Can they handle strength? So yeah, he's still a question mark for me. So I think I completely agree with you. There is kind of something missing, and I'd be happy with them maybe third, fourth round range.
I like that. I like that. Do you have any thoughts? I have like 3 other centers that I'm really looking at that could be day
Yeah.
2, day 3 guys. Those 3 guys, Graham Barton from Duke. He started out at Duke as a center, moved to left tackle just because he was the best player on their offensive line, and you tend to do that in college, but most people expect him to shift back to center. I admittedly haven't watched enough tape on him yet and don't know where to place him, especially since he wasn't at the Senior Bowl. Bo Limmer is a guy
Yep.
I have as a day, probably a late round 3, maybe round 4 guy right now. I think he has some upside, but and then the last guy on the list, Christian Haynes from Connecticut, a guy who played guard, and I really liked the guard. I didn't expect him to. He kind of took Cedric Van Pron's spot at center, to be honest, and really held up well at the Senior Bowl. And I think I could see him moving up draft boards a lot. Do you have thoughts on any of those guys?
Yeah, I do. With Barton, because I really, really do like Barton. I I potentially see him actually more at left guard.
Okay.
He I did see that he only played 5 games as a center, I believe. I just need to see more of him at center. I'm not saying he can't do it, but I don't necessarily draft him if we're looking for a starting center or a center is going to start within a year or two or something. We got a stopgap. He's not something I would basically put all my money down on as a starting center just because I don't know. Having said that, I love his tape. He reminds me so much of Cody Whitehair coming out,
Okay.
where left tackle moves the guard, but is athletic enough to play that center's position. So I do really like Barton, and I would love to see something. If we have the picks, we trade back, getting JPJ and Barton as a center guard tandem.
Ooh,
And, let's say Tevin Jenkins, we don't resign him because of injury. I know in 2 years we've got an out on Nate Davis's contract
we got an
at
out
right
after
guard.
this year.
Yeah, we do have an out on that. So I do think that getting a young guard in relatively early in this draft is ideal. So I do like Barton. I just don't know if center is where he's going to be at home, but I'd be happy to draft him. He can play multiple positions, especially if we got injury problems with Jenkins or whatever else gets thrown our way. He's a great fit for me. Bo Lemire, I do like his tape. I do see the strength issues. I think he does have good size, so I wonder if some of that strength issue is more technique than it is just him getting stronger because he is 6'4", 6'5", and he did play, I think, right guard for 3 years at guard, 1 year at center. I think Lemire is the guy who played 3 years at guard and 1 year at center. But I do, again, same with Barton. You get a guy whose positional versatility is really good. I wouldn't hate the pick. I wouldn't want to draft him and start him day one, but I do like there is some upside to him. And then Christian Haynes, the other guy, I loved him at guard. And to hear that he is playing well at center, man, it's just like back to that just positional versatility. I have Haynes a little bit higher than Lemur. And then
I think he
also I
could
got
potentially go round 2. Do you have him lower than that? I thought I thought he played so well, he could be a round 2 guy, maybe
I
round
do have him pretty high.
okay.
I do like him in that round two range.
I'm still putting my board together. There's still a lot that can happen between now and
Yeah,
the draft, but I think he played well enough that he's probably in that area for me.
yeah, and I think he moved up. For me, I think he's moved up because gives you that center potential. I did go into all of my draft stuff thinking him as a guard, and I really liked him at guard. So
Yeah, me too. He was one
hearing,
of those guys when you talk about adding a guard on day 2, like, and I was thinking in mocks, I've added him in round 3 a lot as a
right,
guard. But with his position versatility, that's a guy I know they like, especially if you're going to be the first backup off the bench. They'd love it if you could play guard or center. So I think if we could lock down the center position somehow, like getting a JPJ or a Zach Frazier and still adding a Christian Haynes, that would be ideal. But
yeah,
probably unlikely.
right, yeah, absolutely. And then there's two other guys that I do like in a later rounds: Tanner Bortolini
Okay.
and Kingsley Aguakugan.
From
I hope
Florida,
I'm
yeah.
saying that right.
Hey, I'm
um,
glad you pronounced that. I wasn't gonna attempt it.
you're right. Tanner Bortolini, I really like his tape. And I think he's got enough athleticism, size, and quickness and technique to be a very good center. I need to do a little more research and watch a little more tape because I see that PFS got him rated as a 240 prospect overall, and I see a guy who, given a couple years, could be a starting center in the NFL. I don't really see why not. And then the
I will say
same thing
quickly on
with
Bortolini because he
yeah,
was down at the Senior Bowl too. He was a guy I wasn't super high on. I hadn't watched a ton of his tape, but I had him. I mean, starting out with the board, sometimes you look at what other people have ranked, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to watch as much on this guy. And I hadn't watched as much on Bortolini, but I will say he looked like he could hold his own down at the Senior Bowl, and his guy I
nice,
should probably watch more on. So I'm glad to hear him as a guy that you like
yeah,
because he was flying under the radar for me, and he did look good when I the one-on-ones I saw from him at the Senior Bowl. He looked good. The top he might not be that, pancake getting Jackson Powers Johnson, but he held his own. He was fluid. He had great knee bend. He held his own in 1v1s. I didn't see him getting beat, and he looked like a natural athlete. So I liked what I saw from him.
nice, yeah, and that's great to hear because that it kind of confirms what I thought I saw on tape.
And that's why I like talking with you because I feel like, yeah, that's a guy definitely that you've watched more tape on than me because I've probably watched 1 or 2 games of tape on him, and you sound like you've definitely watched more. And I liked what I saw from him at the Senior Bowl. So sometimes putting those together, I'll now go back and watch more tape on him and get a better kind of feel of where I should have him ranked.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then Kingsley, I really like Kingsley. I liked what I saw at the Senior Bowl. I haven't watched too much tape of his, but I really liked what I saw. I think he's athletic. I think he's got a mean streak, a developmental guy. I don't think he has the positional versatility because I don't think he's that big to play guard. But given that guy a couple years, same thing with Bortolini, I think you might have a good starting center.
Yeah, I love it. And Kingsley, another guy who was flying under the radar, who seemed to hold his own at the Senior Bowl as well. So, gotta love that you have those guys on your radar as well. Or the center class doesn't look bad to me, and it looks like this is a year where we can get a guy. Obviously, there's one guy that stands out that we really want, but hey, there's a couple other options if we miss out on that guy. And then we'll move on to edge rushers, and this is a class where some people are down on the edge rusher class, but for me, I think it's a uniquely balanced class, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
guys who they might not be top 5 picks. But there's a lot of guys between that 10 and 50 range in the draft where
Yes.
you can find an edge rusher in there that you like. It might not be it's not as deep as wide receiver, but early on in the back half of the first round and most of the way through the second round, I think there's going to be a chance if you're looking for an edge rusher, there's going to be a guy there you like. Is there any edge rushers that you want to talk about specifically?
Well, just to piggyback off what you just said, I really do agree with you. I think this is a year where you've got guys who fit a 3-4 so well, and then guys who fit a 4-3 really well as well. So I think
Let's go ahead and
kind of,
we'll try to in this one, we'll try to stick to the guys who fit the Bears the best, in your opinion.
yeah, I think to start off, I think one of the best fit as far as higher in the draft would be Jared Verse. I'm a little bit down on him compared to other people. I don't see a top 10 pick. Um, I do like his size. I really like a little bit more about his background, how he came from a smaller school. He really worked on his body. He is absolutely ripped, absolutely jacked up. That to me tells me there's determination. He's going to be a professional when he gets to the NFL. He's not going to be a party guy. He's so focused on being the best he can be within his body. I think he has a pretty good first step. At times it's okay. At other times he just jumps out of his stance. So if you're scouting on upside or what he can do special, I want to see more of that because I think that's really going to be key for him to getting a lot of sacks in the NFL. I think where the Bears are going to really like him is just how much he can hold down the edge in the run game,
There it is.
uh, his containment skills. So I definitely see him as a target. My only concern is really going to be I don't see a lot of counter moves or necessarily elite hip bend, ankle flexor, getting around the corner, bending the corner. He's just not that type of a guy. And he doesn't have a ton of counter moves. There's even like a counter move he keeps doing where it's this late, slow spin move. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's
I've
like, not
seen one,
you.
yeah. I think the thing they'll like about there's a lot there they'll like about him. I do think he's potentially a top 10 pick this year. I think I have him right outside of my top 10, but I wouldn't be against it if we took him at pick 9. I think there's a lot of things the Bears will like. He's an elite athlete. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list. Like you said, he's probably the best edge setter when it comes to edges in this class. And I think he reminds me of Montez Sweat in some ways. He's big, he's physical, he's athletic, he's going to stop the run, and his motor is constantly running. He's a high effort player. He
Right.
faced pretty much constant double teams all year down or all year long. So if we can get in there and have Eric Washington coach him up with his hand moves and teach him a couple counter moves, he can learn from Montez Sweat as well and Jervon Dexter and these guys. I think he'd be a great fit for us. He's probably my favorite edge in the class, right there with Liatu Latu.
Yeah, I think he is a very good fit. And I think this is something that I've learned watching Poles draft is what do they look for and Fluce's type of defense, what are they really looking for? So when you go to a guy like Liatu Latu, I love the guy's tape. And I just sit there going, is he really someone Poles is gonna fit his defense's philosophy? He's so quick, his hand use is so incredible. He's got counters on counters. He's just practically unblockable. But what happens in the NFL is you get a guy like this who doesn't necessarily have the physicality to contain the edge, and they're far more of a pass rushers. Teams are just going to run right at you, and he is just going to get beaten up. And I'm crossing my fingers that his medicals come out okay. But for a guy who had a back injury, neck injury, and his one kryptonite in the NFL is that teams are just going to run right at him and say, "Can you hold up with power? Can you contain the edge?" That's where I kind of have question marks. But the quality of pass rush that he has is so incredibly good that it would be very, very hard for me to actually pass him up in this draft.
I hear that, and I think that's my same concern with him. I try to stay out of the medical concerns. At first, I dropped him way down my draft board because I think Ryan Poles is a guy who plays it very safe when it comes to medical things like that.
Right.
I don't think he's going to take a risk on a medical concern top 10 unless our doctors for sure clear him and say, hey, this is not an issue to us. So that's why I initially dropped him, and Jared Verse and Chop Robinson and those guys all moved up. But after seeing him at the Senior Bowl, I think he's right there behind Verse to me. I think Verse is a better fit for us because of
Yeah.
how he defends the run and his length. They love that length and athleticism. Latu is a guy who he just can combo pass rush moves better to get. He has more pass rush moves, more counters, more in his repertoire than anybody else in the entire draft. And the way he kind of puts them together and can combo him. He's unblockable, like you said. So he's a guy who's gonna be an elite sack production guy, I think, in the NFL. He'll probably get more sacks than Jared Verse, but like you said, if teams can run right at him, is he a fit for us? And that's where I lean towards Jared Verse. So we'll go to my next guy then. Where does Chop Robinson fall in that for you?
I think he is a 3-4 guy.
Okay.
I mean, he fits like Dallas Cowboys. With the Eagles going with Fangio as their D coordinator, I think that's a perfect marriage because I think what Brandon Graham is 102 years old. I don't see him as a fit with us because I don't think he's got the height, weight kind of a thing, and he's more of the Latu pass rush quickness. I like Chop Robinson in space more, having a little bit wider of an angle to blitz the quarterback. I think he's got enough speed and athleticism to cover as an outside linebacker in the NFL. I just don't see him as a fit. I do like the prospect, and I think he'll be really good on a 3-4 team.
Yep, I see. I have those questions. That's one I'm kind of 50-50 on. What I
Oh,
see
okay.
a lot of that first step quickness and a guy with the explosiveness. He's a freak athlete. He's 6'3", 255. I think that's what he's listed at anyway. If he has that frame and is really clocked in at sub 4.5, you can add to that frame and get him to 6'3", maybe 265, 270 range. I think he could be a fit. But yeah, that's a question mark for me, and I don't know how Poles feels on that. But he's a guy I really like, and I hope that they like him. But like you said, there's definitely a chance there that he's not a fit for Poles and Eberflus. So who are some more guys you think are fits?
Okay, so some guys I really do like that I think are really good fits. Well, the next guy who's been absolutely climbing up the board, Darius Robinson.
Oh man,
Yes, 6'5". He's nearly 300 pounds, and he is a rocked up 300 pounds. There's no fat on this guy's body.
I
Great
saw it
length.
firsthand, man. I shook his hand, and
Yeah,
that guy is a monster for sure.
yeah. I mean that to me is exactly what Ryan Poles wants out of his D line group. Guys who's got the length, they could play inside, they can play outside. I mean, look, talk about Sweat, being 6'6" with that huge wingspan. I mean, Darius Robinson, he is such a fit to me. And I know people are gonna say, oh, he's gone from a fourth or fifth round draft pick to now he's in the second round. Now there's talks of him in the first. I
That's
would
just
have no
people missed out.
problem.
Yeah, people missed out, I think.
Yeah,
I think that's one of those guys. It happens every year, and people are like, "Oh, this guy rising up the draft board." It's like you don't know where he was at on the
exactly.
Bears draft. The Bears could have had him as a top 20 player all season. He's rising up the
Absolutely.
draft boards on national media guys and fans who are getting more familiar with him. But you could see firsthand when he took his first rep at the Senior Bowl. It's like my eyes are huge. Like okay, Darius Robinson, like that's one of the best. If it wasn't for JPJ and how much we need a center, I may have been a little biased. Honestly, I think Darius Robinson probably had the best Senior Bowl week, but JPJ was a guy I was already on number one on my watch list when I went down there. So him standing out all week had him take the player of the week for me. But Darius
Right.
Robinson's right there, like absolute stud.
Yes, I really like him. And in some of our chats and other different shows and stuff, we've been talking about Darius Robinson for well over a month or even into last season. Like, man, this guy is, there's some size and there's some skill and there's some speed. And I mean, you just love what you see. And he's not getting national attention, but,
Now
we
he is.
all loved what we saw.
Yeah, 100%, man. And he's a guy I think he's probably played so well. He's going first round for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think some people are gonna be like, "Oh, that was a reach," but he's not. He is not a reach. Please.
Yeah, not a
Um,
reach wherever he goes. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Another guy I really like, but I do have a slight question mark. Braylon Trice.
Okay.
I really like his game. I He's got good strength. His hustle is unmatched. He's aggressive. He's got a lot of counter moves. Washington really played him all over the line, which always frustrates me a little bit because I see him having a home at defensive end and also moving inside, but they played him outside linebacker. They had him playing 3 tech and stuff, but against teams that I was like, I want to see you at edge versus this tackle, not guard, or
Hmm.
versus the guard. Great size. The only issue I have, and the question mark for me, is his arm length doesn't quite match his height or his size. Being 6'4", I would expect him to have a little longer arms, and he doesn't quite have that. And I know how much Ryan Poles and Flus values that arm length. So
And
he's a
athleticism.
question.
My question is athleticism too, but he's another
Right.
really good
A little bit
prospect.
tighter in the hip, but you talk about the hits principle and the hustle and he plays with a lot of violence. So I'm really on the fence with him. He might even be a guy that maybe he does move down inside to 3 tech where his arm length isn't as much of an issue. I think we saw with Tyree Wilson from last
Texas
year's
Tech,
draft
yep.
going to the Ravers. He was, a guy who I think he played a lot of edge early in the season. It wasn't until they started moving him inside did he start getting that pressure. So maybe that's Braylon Trice. I don't know. I just love watching him play. Love his aggression, his violence, and his hustle. So for me, I'm on board with him, but I wouldn't be surprised if Poles goes a different direction.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's kind of deep in that range that he's another guy who could go late first round, but could be there well into day two. And you never know where he's going to go. And that's kind of the biggest question mark right now for me is where these guys end up going when the edge class sorts itself out. And Brandon Dorless is another guy who's on that list. To me, I think he's right there with Darius Robinson as a guy who's big enough to play defensive tackle. You can mold him into a 3 tech if you want, but I also like him at defensive end, and he had another killer Senior Bowl as well.
Yeah, that's actually good to hear. I'm not really sure where to put Doris in its position versatility. Also, there's some, I think he's 6'3", and but he's also, a heavy 6'3".
Yeah, like
So I start
6'3",
to look
270 something. Yeah.
right. So when I start to look at that length and that height that I think that we look for, I question whether the defensive end side of it is there, but moving him inside on this team makes a little more sense to me. And I've seen a lot of really explosive plays from him. And then there's some games that I watched where I didn't see the explosion, so I don't know if it was just the matchup or maybe it was a slight injury or it's just consistency. So I do really like Dorless. I question where he goes in the draft, second round, third round. I trust in Poles. So if he did draft him, got him in the third round, to me, that would be a win.
Awesome. Yeah. Is there any other guys at defensive end that you think are good fits for the Bears?
Actually, yes. And he's a guy who I think is going really under the radar because he played across from Chop Robinson. And I think
Ooh,
he's getting this narrative that he's another outside linebacker, Chop Robinson-esque guy. And that's Adisa Isaac.
okay.
I love this guy. I mean, 6'4", 255, but he is a skinny 255. He's explosive off the edge. He's got incredibly long arms. He's got the bend. And to me, it's just like this guy's frame could put on another 10, 15 pounds in the NFL. And in our scheme, we ask him to do that, and he maintains that bend, that quickness off the edge. I'm really high on this kid, and I'm not really sure if it's just me or if maybe once we get close to the draft, I could see this guy as being a late first round draft pick. It
Okay.
wouldn't
Okay.
surprise me.
He was on my watch list when I went down to the Senior Bowl. He was a guy who I didn't watch every rep. Like, there's so much like to watch down there, but he's
Right.
a guy who, in my opinion, he didn't catch my eye and stand out like I thought he would. So I'm
Okay.
curious what other people from the Senior Bowl thought on him. He's a guy I'm probably gonna have to watch more tape on. To me, Chop always stood out more, but going
Right.
down the Senior Bowl, he was definitely a guy that I was like, I gotta watch more of this guy. And I feel like he didn't stand out enough. Like a guy like Marshawn Nealand, who was way behind him, he
Right.
caught my eye a bunch. He was winning a
Yes.
bunch of reps, and I expected Isaac to do that more, and I don't think I saw enough of it. But I could have missed some too. Like, there's a lot of times where I was watching wide receivers and I didn't see every defensive end rep, so I could have missed it. But he didn't stand out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good insight. One thing I did hear, and I saw a rep from, is someone made this comment, and I thought it was pretty funny. Is that Adesanya Isaac? He had this rep against Jordan Morgan, and everybody said it looks like Isaac just moved Jordan Morgan to left guard. So
Nice. I actually don't even think I saw that one. So that's one I gotta try to see. Yep.
and I do think Morgan is a left guard. I have a little debate with some other guys about, tackle versus guard being his best position. So I did think that was kind of funny. And admittedly, I didn't hear a whole bunch on Isaac from the Senior Bowl that is, fluffing up my favoritism towards him.
Yeah, and
But
that's what I like because that means your
yeah,
opinion was based off the tape you watched, and
yeah. Oh God, I
and
love the tape.
that's
I
what I
don't,
love
I
to
don't.
hear.
Yeah, I don't really know why I like him so much more than other people do, and maybe I just caught a lot of good games or whatever it may be. Maybe Chop Robinson stealing all the double teams and Isaac single team. I mean, I'll definitely go and do another rewatch just because I want to hammer down these guys a little more. But I really like him.
And that's my favorite thing about this time of year, man. It's that these, and that's something I think a lot of fans they don't understand that the draft boards are still fluid, especially for teams
Yeah,
right now. Like they don't even know how tall a guy like Caleb Williams is, and that does matter to teams. And when they get those measurables and stuff, that's when they really start putting their boards together. That's next month at the combine, and that's something guys like me and J2K probably been doing at home for 15, 20 years. And that's why it's so good to talk to you and kind of get your thoughts on some of these prospects, man. I don't want to keep you much longer. Is there anyone else you want to talk about before we go, or any other guys you think might be a perfect fit for the Bears, or any other final thoughts?
yeah. There's one guy I'm very very intrigued by. Justin Aboyshby,
Ooh,
the defensive end slash three tech from Alabama. He's got great size. He's got really good athleticism. He's a bit of a tweener. I'm not sure if he's a left defensive end primarily or he's just a pass rushing three tech, where he's going to fit. But when you talk about just the length and the size and athleticism that Ryan Poles and Flus are looking for, this guy seems like a fifth round draft pick who could have a ton of upside given get some good coaching and hammering down more one position and getting that technique, building up that technique. So I did want to shout him out. I do like him.
that's a guy I definitely have to watch some more tape on, man. That's a great call. Definitely have to pull him up. I love talking to you, man. If you want to come on again after
Oh,
the combine
absolutely.
or sometime, just let me know, man. We can talk again for sure.
Yeah, I think like combine's going to be good time to talk, and then after free agency, we get the board settles a little more on combine, we get targets a little more after free agency. And yeah, Swift man, I really appreciate you reaching out to me and having me on the show. Like you, I absolutely love this time of year. I love talking prospects and ball and getting your opinion, and your opinion helps me reflect on mine and I'm going to go back and watch a little more Chop Robinson, a little more Brandon Dorless so I can hammer down my opinions and my thoughts and stuff. And so I just really appreciate you having me on, and also just overall just you being a place that I get to go to on YouTube to talk football with people and hear your takes. And I love everything you're doing, so keep up the good work. And yeah, again man, thanks for having me on. And to everybody in the chat, you guys are awesome. I love talking to you guys. It's why I'm here. It's what I love to do. And hey baby, bear down.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. And same thing, man. There's some guys after talking with you that I definitely got to go back and look at, and I can't wait. And for everyone in the chat, let us know if there's any guys you think we should watch more of, because that's what we're going to be doing over the next few months, probably. So watching tape on draft guys and figuring out who we think the Bears are going to draft. Stay tuned until next time, and bear down.
Bear down.